This is Mr. Peoples here, and today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Antietam, our final battle in the section titled War in the East. And before we get to the notes, I want to talk about how this battle came about. So we're going to go to a different PowerPoint here. Okay, and I'm going to kind of describe how the two armies meet on this battle by talking about using these circles. Now, a couple of things. What I have here, the blue circles represent the Union Army, and the red circle represents the Confederate Army. We are a little bit, here's Washington, D.C., where the Union Army is located, and at this time, George McClellan is in charge again. John Pope was fired from his role in losing the Second Battle of Bull Run. So McClellan is back in charge, and McClellan's troops are here in Washington, D.C. Robert E. Lee is sitting right here in Manassas, just where the Second Battle of Bull Run was fought. And the two Union armies over here, this army is located in a town called Winchester, Maryland, or excuse me, Winchester, Virginia. And then this blue circle is another Union army located at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Okay, and that's going to become important as we get here talking about this battle. Now, Robert E. Lee had just won the 7 Days battles, and he had just won the Second Battle of Bull Run, and he believed that it was time now to take the war to the north. It was about August-September of 1862, and at that time during the year, it's harvest time. It's when the farmers start to bring their crops out of the field, and there had been a lot of fighting in that area of Virginia, and Robert E. Lee wanted to give those farmers a break from the fighting, give them a chance to bring their crops out of the field without having to worry about armies marching in their fields. But he also had the intention of marching into the state of Maryland, which was a slave state, but still part of the Union, and trying to get Maryland to join in on the side of the Confederacy. And he thought a victory in Maryland would do this. And so he decides to march his troops into Maryland. Now, as he marches his troops into Maryland, he heads to a town called Frederick, Maryland. And as he's marching through Maryland, he has his troops play the state song of Maryland to try and persuade the people of Maryland to rise up with him. But he was unsuccessful. The people of Maryland actually looked at the Confederate Army as invaders, and they weren't all that happy about the Confederates coming into their state. And his plan was to continue north, maybe take Philadelphia or possibly even New York. Now, McClellan is in charge, and McClellan very slowly starts to follow Robert E. Lee. And the Confederates camp in this town called Frederick, or outside this town called Frederick. And this is where Robert E. Lee makes a very important decision. He decides to divide his army. Again, we've talked about him twice now, dividing his army and winning. Well, he decides to divide his army now. Once he heard that McClellan was in charge again, he figured he had time because McClellan took so long to get moving. So he divides his army, and he sends his armies to take those two towns, Winchester and Harper's Ferry. So he divides his army into four, and he sends those armies after Winchester and Harper's Ferry. Now, McClellan surprises Lee by moving right away. And about a day or two after the Confederates leave their camps in Frederick, Maryland, McClellan and the Union soldiers are there in those camps, and a Union soldier finds on the ground a piece of paper wrapped in 2 cigars. And in this piece of paper was Robert E. Lee's special order that said that he was going to divide his army. This was given to General McClellan, and McClellan now had information that Lee's army was smaller and divided. And McClellan had the opportunity to defeat the Confederate Army right then and there in September of 1862. But for some reason, McClellan doesn't move right away. It takes him about a day or so to get his army moving. And that day or so is an important problem, or an important thing, because that day or so gives Robert E. Lee time to bring his soldiers back together before the Union Army arrived, and so that the Confederates and the Union could fight at full strength. If we're to zoom in, couple things that the Union Army had to go through. They had to go through, there's two mountains here that the Union Army had to fight through in order to get to Robert E. Lee's army. And it took some time for that to happen, and that gave Robert E. Lee time to gather his forces back together. Here you can see where the Union Army is going to move to. So as they move, Robert E. Lee gains knowledge that the Union's army is moving, and he quickly calls his soldiers back together, and they decide to meet near a town called Sharpsburg, Maryland, right nearby a creek called Antietam Creek. And that's going to lead us into the Battle of Antietam, which becomes the single deadliest day in American history. Still to this day, more Americans died and were injured on that day than any other day in American history. So just to see all these armies come back together, they all come back together near Sharpsburg, so you can see where that's located. And this is a close-up of the area of the battlefield. The battlefield had three phases. The first phase took place in this area right here known as the cornfield. The Union Army attacked in that cornfield. The Confederates pushed back, and that happened early in the morning, about dawn. From about dawn till about 10 in the morning is when that part of the battle happened. Then, as the day rolls on, from about 10 in the morning till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, the battle moves to this area right here, the second phase, and the battle is highlighted in a sunken road where the Confederates were located, where they fired upon the Union Army. Eventually, the Union Army takes control of this sunken road. That sunken road becomes known as Bloody Lane because of the number of dead bodies piled up inside there over the course of the battle. And then the final part of the battle takes place around a bridge called Rohrbach Bridge, and that's right here on the battlefield. And that bridge later becomes known as Burnside's Bridge because the general, Ambrose Burnside, for the Union, was asked to take that bridge. And so the three phases of the battle take place, and here you can see kind of on the battlefield where those things are located. And you can see it's just outside the town of Sharpsburg. In the classroom, there's a book that has different pictures from the battlefield and kind of shows you different things. Shows you the sunken road, shows you the church where the battle took place, and the bridge. So all of those things are there in the little picture book in my classroom. We're going to head back here and just make sure we get our notes down for this stuff, just so you're aware of what's happening here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in class too. But the Battle of Antietam becomes the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. More than 12,000 Union and 13,000 Confederate casualties. Just to give you an idea, if you add all those together, that's 25,000 casualties. The city of Chaska and Chanhassen have about 23,000 people. And so if you can imagine the entire population of a Chanhassen or the entire population of a Chaska being killed, wounded, missing, or captured during the course of a battle. At the end of this battle, both armies basically end up in the same places they were when they started the battle. But at the end of the day, the Union Army stops Robert E. Lee from moving further into the north. And Robert E. Lee, because of the casualties, has to return back to Virginia and kind of build up his army again. So in that way, it was a success for the North and for McClellan to stop the Confederates from moving forward. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture here. This is a picture from the battlefield of Antietam. It does show Confederate and Union soldiers lying dead on the battlefield. One of the things that came about during the Civil War was the technology of photography, and so for the first time, people around the world get to see pictures of how brutal war is. And so this is an example. If you do not want to look at it, please, you can stop it before I click on that picture, and we'll continue to talk about the Battle of Antietam when we come back to class. So I'm going to move to the picture now. So again, if you want to stop, now would be the time to stop. But if you want to see the picture, here is a picture of the battlefield from the Battle of Antietam. And these are actually Confederate soldiers lying near where the cornfield was, the early part of the battle. Okay? I'm going to go back. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to talk some more about this in class. Remember, your learning targets are to know the major battles and the winners. The Union won this Battle of Antietam. The other thing is knowing who the important people are, and so we talked about Robert E. Lee, George McClellan, and those are the two main, and Stonewall Jackson. Those are the three people we've talked about here to remember over the course of this particular unit, or this particular section. Thanks.